Scrutiny Committee 2 meeting, which, due to government advice to the public to practice social distancing, will be held virtually with committee members and officers accessing the meeting from remote locations. The meeting is being recorded and will be available via the Council's website to be viewed subsequently. Please can everyone ensure that all mobile phones are switched off or to silent mode. Members will have received an electronic copy of the agenda on Thursday, the 27th of January 2022. For the record, the agenda can be viewed on the Council's website. Members and officers will be speaking at various points during the meeting, and those speaking may switch their cameras on at that point, but I would ask that, with the exception of myself as chairperson, at all other times you keep your cameras and microphones switched off, as this will help to minimise any background noise and interference and to ensure the connection remains as stable as possible. Please do not use your microphone until I invite you to do so. Officers from Scrutiny will be supporting the meeting and will be monitoring the use of microphones throughout the meeting, and where necessary will mute those not being used. If any members wish to speak to raise a point or question, they should please click on the raise hand button at the top of the Teams window and I will come to you in turn. Please do not use the instant messaging chat to enter questions or comments. So we move into the agenda now. Item number 1 on the agenda is apologies for absence. Meryl, have you got a list of those apologies? Or Lucy, sorry.
That's okay, I've got them, Chair. I've received apologies for absence from Councillor Mary Hughes, Councillor Mike Kern, Councillor Martin Jones, Councillor David White, Head of Nursing Lloyd Griffith, and the Corporate Director, Social Services and Wellbeing, Claire Marchant, will be leaving the meeting at 11 AM.
Great, thanks. I've had no other apologies either. So if we move into item number 2, that's declarations of interest. If any member has an interest to declare in any matter on the agenda, please click on the raise hand button and I will come to you in turn to declare your interest. Councillor Janice Lewis.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I suppose I have personal interest in the fact that I am a member of the library services and use it frequently. And also I am a volunteer who runs a community centre, which is 3.9, I believe. Thank you. Bye.
Okay, great. Thanks. Has anyone else got any?
No. Okay.
Councillor Clark, your microphone is on.
Sorry about that. Sorted
It's
out.
okay. Right. No more? Right, okay, we'll move on to agenda item number 3 then, which is the progress in delivering priorities for wellbeing, leisure and cultural services in Bridgend. So can I ask, Andrew Thomas, are you presenting the report?
I think my director may introduce and I will add to, if that's okay.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to Andrew. I'm only going to give really brief introductions to this report because, as you know, Chair, we've got a number of key partners here this morning. I'm sure that the Scrutiny Committee will be more interested in hearing from them than from myself. But I think this is a really important report for Scrutiny to consider this morning. Our leisure and cultural services and our wellbeing approach in Bridgend really has been at the fore of our response during the last 18 months, nearly 2 years of the COVID pandemic, and needs to continue to be at the fore of our response during the recovery phase over the coming years. So I think it's a great opportunity this morning, not just to hear from ourselves as officers of the council, but from key partners about what this last period has been like for them and the plans going forward. So happy to hand over to Andrew and to partners to take you through the report.
Thank you, Claire. Okay, so I'm Andrew Thomas. I'm the Group Manager for Prevention and Wellbeing, and these services sit within Social Services and Wellbeing. I guess a small internal department, but connected to some larger partnerships that we will hear more from this morning. So the report that we've been asked to bring looks at leisure and cultural opportunities, what is being done and what will be done to improve accessibility, removal of barriers and things that can be developed to support both individual and community wellbeing linked to council and community COVID recovery. We also have representation to show the work that has been progressed with the third sector and through our building resilient communities approaches, where that has been and where that may be taken in the future. And to add to that, we've included some of the areas of service that the Prevention and Wellbeing Service directly delivers, particularly in terms of active young people programmes and healthy living services and play development. So in terms of the introductions to our attendees, and there's a big thanks from myself here, we have Scott Rolfe, who's the Chief Executive of Halo Leisure, Richard Hughes, who is the Chief Executive of AWEN, the Cultural Trust Partnership. We've got Simon Gwynn, who I work with regularly in terms of the Halo Partnership as Partnership Manager. And from BAVO and representing broader third sector, we have Kay Baker, the Operations and Partnership Manager. I think we've shared with you within the report probably around 53 different descriptors of the types of work that have gone on, the different programmes, the impacts, the challenges faced. But I hope that one of the things that will come across is where people have tried to be creative and innovative in scenarios where perhaps there have been no footpath or footprints to follow, and it's required that togetherness as partners to unpick what is the best way forward. Probably a little bit unusual. I wanted to focus not on the detail of those because I think Scrutiny will actually delve into those items, but the well-being objective, helping people and communities to be more healthy and resilient. I think the modification to that well-being objective arose from the World Audit Office review of how services like this could really contribute to preventing the escalation of needs and to develop community well-being. So in many ways that has been a catalyst for a lot of the work that is moving in this direction. And I think finally looking at Section 7 and the Wellbeing Future Generations Act implications, I think many of the 5 themes are very connected into this report. So the long-termism and looking at the long-term partnerships that have been put in place, certainly with Halo and AWEN of 15 and 20-year agreements, you know, not anticipating a pandemic, but probably in a strong-based position to respond. And also probably 3 years of work has developed with BAVO and looking at the next 3 to 5 years and how that partnership can work, focusing on prevention approaches, not necessarily looking to fix problems, but building on strengths in people and in communities and connecting those things together. The One Council approach, working very closely with our partners to understand what are important, what are our priorities and how we can collectively respond to those things, whilst trying to remain sustainable and viable in our assets, our services and our programmes. And I think also you may find the collaborative approaches where the types of services I run may not in other areas of Wales be connected into social care and health and the broader well-being agenda and even the regional working. So there's hopefully some interest on that. I think key point for me is involvement. Hopefully one thing that comes across is how these programmes, these opportunities and services are developed with people as opposed to done to people or done for people. Both are necessary for different types of people where they find themselves in life, but in many ways a lot of the things we present today are about trying to de-escalate needs and allow people to maintain independence within communities. So on that note, Chair, I'm done.
Thanks very much for that. I think you're correct in saying about how important this report is and the following report. It's something, given the pandemic, that it's on the minds of everyone, I think, in the community is well-being. And when we look at the next report as well, mental health is such an important report. We did have a discussion in our pre-meeting, and our questions have stemmed from firstly from the title of the report when it says about the progress. We were impressed with a number of points that you'd put down of actions that are being taken now and what you're doing, but we couldn't see much about the progress of different areas because it says what you're doing now but not what you had been doing. So I think that's where a number of our questions have stemmed from. So if I open it up to members now, if you want to raise your hands if you've got any specific questions as we go through agenda item number 3 in the report. I've got a number of questions I've pulled from the pre-meeting that I'll ask, but if anyone's got a burning question first, please put your hand up to ask it. Just waiting to see if there's any hands go up. Alternatively, jump in as I raise some of the things that we discussed in the pre-meeting, if you want to expand on these, because I know some people had some comments in the pre-meeting. So if I take you through then, and while I'm waiting for any hands to go up, the reports, we came to section 4, which is the current situation and the proposals. For example, we picked up on things. If you go to item number 4.4, the participation in the Learn to Swim programmes have rebuilt to 80% of former numbers, but there are restrictions that affect capacity and a 21-month backlog of children who are unable to benefit from a school swimming offer. And school swimming is hoped to be re-established in 2022, and planned growth in swimming teacher resource. So I wondered if we could expand on this one to start with. For example, if it's going to be re-established in 2022, do we have an idea of when this will happen yet? Because obviously if we're in a 21-month backlog now, if we're starting this and we're not starting for another 6 months, for example, that will be added on to the 21-month backlog. And then with that, is there any catch-up scheme in place? Because there will be 2 school years of children who will have missed this opportunity to learn vital swimming lessons, to have these vital swimming lessons that could save lives, essentially. So if I leave you with that one first, I don't know if you want to come in with that one, Andrew, or if you want to pass it on to somebody else.
I think I can start by introducing, the points you raise, Chair, are exactly the reason why the issue is included within the report. The way that school swimming is supported in Bridgend is the investment is delegated to the schools, and then I think it is for the schools to arrange how they want to use that investment to attend these programmes. Being honest, schools, as per the rest of the country, have faced these restrictions. I think when allowed to restart school, there have been logistical issues in prioritising the educational and COVID-safe environments of schools. I think it's fair to say, and I will bring in my colleagues from our end, we had plans pre-Christmas to restart. The restart, I believe, is now happening, those programmes. But as you identify, there will be young people who are no longer in primary schools that are now attending secondary schools. So the project needs to move beyond what is just school swimming. And our data in the past has shown that for many of our young people, particularly those from more disadvantaged communities, school swimming may be most or all of your input into that learn to swim experience. So we now have to look at more holistic programs, how we target programs like the Free Swimming Initiative, where we know people have barriers such as cost to learn to swim, how we can make programs more available to those people that are not going to be engaging in any other way. It's potentially a real challenge going forward. It's not unique for Bridgend, but it is one that needs to be firmly on the radar, and that's why, one, it's on our report, and 2, within our planning as a partnership. I think I could bring in either Scott or Simon from Halo to touch on this, but it is something we're in discussion with our education colleagues on also.
Okay, thanks very much.
I'm happy to jump in on this one.
Great, thanks.
So I think just to touch on the school swimming, so it's mentioned about the restrictions and the impact, and Andrew just touched on those as well. What I will note is that actually this year, so 2022, we got some great news. So we've now got an 18-week program of school swimming that's returned. So as we sit here today, so from January, we've got an 18-week plan for the rest of this year into July of schools coming back, which does mean that we've now got 30 different schools back swimming advanced our pools throughout the borough, which is obviously at Maesteg, Anasaldra, Pyle and Pencoed. So we have schools across all of those pools now and running those programs are back in. And actually there's 118 different groups, so different year groups or the same year group coming at differing times as well, based on the numbers of those schools, because obviously there's still restrictions on capacity that will then be into those school swimming. So good news on the school swimming that they're coming back.
Great, thanks. Can I just ask Gary Thomas, you've raised your hand if you wanted to speak.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Simon. The biggest concern he had was the pools were closed on a Sunday. And my sister goes regular and she said they close on a Sunday. Why a Sunday, she said. You know, especially my stake. You know, I
Yeah,
suppose,
so it depends on what time she's going, to be fair, councillor. So we do run a number of lesson programmes on a Saturday at my stag, on the weekends. We do run them on the Sunday as well. We have historically shut earlier in my stag through the hours on the basis of capacity and use and the demographics. So what we've done over the years is their programmes slightly less in my stag based on that usage pattern. And obviously during the pandemic, we have controlled access through those bits as well. So there's been a number of things that have impacted on that. Historically, my stag and the usage has always been slightly less.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair.
Not a problem.
Thanks very much.
So in terms of just touching on the resource element that's mentioned, we have had challenges with swimming teaching across the piece. That's not unique for Bridgend. It's across the whole of the UK, actually, that's been a struggle for swimming teachers. We are running a number of programs now through this year where we're delivering swimming teacher courses, and we're offering that out to a number of partners and to the population in terms of access. So we're looking for new people to come into our lesson program to teach as well, and we have been quite successful with those programs through this year so far, and our resourcing is building. Can't hide away from the challenges that we did face. Does that answer the question, Chair?
I think so, and I think Andrew Thomas wants to come back in as well on it.
Yeah, just in terms of broader context, Chair, I think when everything closed and was then permitted to reopen in different phases and different restrictions, the position of council was to rebuild services from the base, to have aspirations that every building would have aspirations to reopen, but that not everything needed to be exactly as it was previously. So in many ways, the opportunities that have been developed around reaching people digitally or through outreach programs and all of those things are in the mix during the recovery period, because I think there is a need to be as prudent as possible with resources and being mindful that the hardship fund investment from Welsh Government that has been supportive over the last 18 months to 2 years ceases at the end of March. So this is about rebuilding the business, if you can call that, from the base, progressively growing the opportunities and maximising the use as we go on that journey.
Okay, great, thanks. Are you happy with all of that, Gary? You're on mute then.
Thank you both, anyways.
Yeah, okay, great. Okay, if we move on to the report then, the next item that we were looking at was number 4.7 again with the swimming, and it's Halo have piloted an innovative autism swimming pilot program with 20 participants based on the nationally identified high drowning risk to people living with autism. This has generated a subsequent interest of over 100 parents. Plans to expand this opportunity are being developed. Have you got any timescales on these plans, please?
Yeah, I'll jump in again. Yeah, we do. We are running another program for the autism swimming in February. So we have another program running in February where there's 36 spaces. So we've opened up 36 spaces for that. We've also just recruited into our team a young person's active communities coordinator who was supporting the delivery of that program on a more regular basis. And our aspiration is to be running these programs on a weekly basis like a normal lesson program. So we will be developing that over the next year. So we've probably got a 3 to 6 month lead in to have them on a more regular basis, as we, this will only be our 3rd session that we've run through the autism, and we want to make sure we got it right. But yeah, we're quite excited that we've got 36 next week in a couple of weeks' time, and then developing it for the rest of the year as well.
Great, thanks very much. Anyone else got anything to add on this point? Otherwise we'll move on. Hopefully it won't just be me talking to you. Sorry, Andrew Thomas, you want to come in?
Yeah, I was just going to give some context to this and to probably applaud Halo for responding to this. This is recognised as a worldwide issue in terms of the sheer volume of increased risk for injury-related deaths. It's quite well documented. The figures vary, but it's as much to do with behaviours that accompany autism in terms of wandering behaviour and wanting to elope from structured opportunities and authority and people wandering in. It doesn't all mean within sort of leisure centres that the risk is there. In fact, working with young people with autism beyond leisure venues to understand more open water based on our coastal opportunities. So we tend to connect a lot of people into our surfing programs in partnership with third sector and those kind of things. So there's more understanding of different types of water also. But I think we are also looking to progressively invest more and more into these things. We're working with the Bridgend Inclusive Network group, which supports, I think, so this morning, 15 to 20 other groups of young people with disabilities. I'm working with them to access more swimming pool time as well as the lesson programs also.
Great, thanks very much. I can't see any more hands up, so we'll move on to item number 4.8. And that's the Feel Good for Life programme has been supporting people living with dementia or cognitive impairment and carers, engaging 100 people, and face-to-face sessions have restarted. I was just wondering, is there scope to engage with more people with regards to this?
Yeah, I'll pick it up again. There is, and we've actually got an application in to develop the programme across more of the centres. So we're expanding it every 6 months in terms of into differing centres, and we've got a national lottery application in for the moment for 350,000 to support the development over 5 years of how this programme picks up, and obviously the support that we get from our partners from Barvo, Arwin, and also from BCBC are highly important in terms of how we deliver, and we've made sure that we have a cooperative approach across the piece, which makes a big difference to how we're able to make it sustainable and move forward. But yes, we will be developing across every centre as we move forward. It will be going into Anasaldra next. It's already in Maesteg and Bridgend Life Centre, and it will be developing into Anasaldra as part of the next step as well.
Great, thanks very much. Andrew, do you want to come into?
I just wanted to flag that, you know, while Simon is answering, this is a great example of where many partners come together. So Halo are fully involved. We've also had the Wales Cooperative Centre working on digital aspects. Arwen and the library service support other activities, and then the connection into social care and local community coordination bring all of this together. So it's an interesting model of how partners can come together for things, as opposed to seeing it as a singular partner. And when we come to pooling resources to expand and grow these things, it has more chance.
Great, thanks very much. I'm just checking there's no more hands up on this this item. The next thing we discussed in our pre-meeting was the library services. We had a number of points on the library issues next. 4.12, that is the library service in Bridgend is delivered on behalf of the council by Arwen, and the service has been proactive in reopening when permitted. So it discusses about the innovative click and collect scheme that was operated, and what we were discussing here is our concerns about the digitally excluded and how were they able to still utilise a library, because there's a large number of either elderly people or people who cannot use IT equipment or don't have access or the funds to purchase their broadband, or there are also those who live in particularly the valleys communities who don't have a very stable broadband service. So how did you deal with those, and how were they able to still use the service?
I think the strongest answer you will get on this would come from Mr. Hughes, and I will try and top and tail some of the context with it.
Great, thanks very much.
Yeah, thanks very much, and good morning, everybody. Yes, a very good question. I think the click and collect title of that's a little bit misleading. We actually called it call and collect. So it was as easy as giving a phone call to your local library, and so anybody that was digitally excluded could obviously browse online. But actually, we recognise that many of our customers don't have those facilities. Indeed, it's why we exist to a large extent, is to try and support people who are digitally included and train people in normal times. But this particular service was a call and collect service where people could actually telephone their local library and then order the books. And very often and we move on to later in the report, perhaps to the home delivery service. So those who could not then get to a library were also able to access the home delivery service, which gained a lot of plaudits throughout the pandemic for the way that it was able to engage with people who were socially isolated, and in a way provided a kind of a social service, an informal social service as well. So there were many avenues to actually contact the library other than the online.
Great. So when you say the delivery, you're talking about 4.13, which is the Books on Wheels service, is that right?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. So in our pre-meeting then, we also looked at, if I jump on that because it's linked to the first one, is the Books on Wheels and how people were able to find out about this, because I hadn't seen it publicised anywhere, and a number of others in the pre-meet had said they hadn't. So how you would know that this service was there. And also pre-pandemic, we used to have the library buses that came out. Did they stop, or have they continued as well throughout the pandemic?
So the actual mobile library, there would have been that was a change in service which was agreed with the council pre-pandemic. So moving away from probably was quite an inefficient service in many ways, certainly not an environmentally friendly service, of the old traditional mobile to the home delivery service. And this is a service we're hoping to improve upon and expand as well. So so you would not have seen the old style library bus for a couple of years now. Instead, we moved to this service where we were able to reach more people more often, the people that really needed that service. Across Bridgend, when we did look at it, our static libraries, if you like, are pretty well spread, and those people who are able to get to a library can get to one quite easily within a 5-minute drive time. So it was more effective to run a books on wheels to somebody's home, or into we go to residential care homes and a number of other settings as well. So far, I hope that answers the first bit. So far as the how people are aware of it, we do work very closely with local community coordinators, with Andrew's team and others to try and refer people to the service, as well as promotion to families and others through social media and usual promotional channels. We could always do more, and I think it's something we are looking at with Andrew colleagues at the council, and indeed with Claire, as to how maybe these are more formally referred through the social care system. There's a data protection matter that obviously we need to get over, but if this could be part of a package, if you like, a package of care, that people are made aware of this and those details passed to us, then I think that would increase the number of people being aware and being able to access the service.
Great, thanks. Andrew, did you want to come in as well?
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think Rich may have sold himself short here, where many of the things that actually were started, I think we've used the phrase when permitted, that wasn't necessarily accepted by every library service across Wales, and some people did not adopt such a proactive approach to continue sort of the delivery of these different types of services. I think picking up on your point on the digital and perhaps the role of libraries and supporting those that are digitally excluded, yeah, again, this is a significant issue. I think the work that Feel Good for Life has mentioned, there was a digital aspect to that before the face-to-face. And also Owen have been part of a joined-up programme of iPad loans to members of the public through the libraries. We've been working with Wales Co-op, Digital Communities Wales. Is it of a scale that makes a huge difference? It's probably more of an innovation approach to understand what is required to support more vulnerable people who are not digital. I think one of the bigger discussions going on at the moment, our libraries have always acted as council information points, supporting people perhaps that wouldn't go into the council offices, and this is becoming more of a looking forward discussion, how library staff can be trained, have up-to-date information. And one of the big discussions that we're involved with very currently is, can they support people to access their My Council app and use that kind of engagement within library settings? And can libraries also be used for council staff to meet people face-to-face in library settings for those that are not comfortable with other approaches? So yeah, I think pandemic has created some things that probably don't go, that you try to embed the new approaches alongside other things that have proven effective.
Great, thank you. Councillor Sorrell Dendy, did you want to ask a question?
Yes, thanks, Chair. Talking about intermittent broadband in the Valleys community, unfortunately, I can't turn my camera off, or otherwise I might lose you all. During the pandemic, I did some volunteer work helping people in the community, and I was contacted a couple of times from colleagues in social services about being able to provide books for people in the community. So with the delivery thing, I think it would have been nice to maybe there might be a gap there between social services knowing about the sort of delivery schemes and things like that for the books, because I found it difficult myself, which did have access to internet, where the people who needed these services didn't, finding out how to do the delivery. But I did find information on the click and collect. Unfortunately, as somebody who doesn't drive, clicking and collecting from the libraries that were doing it at the time wasn't an option. I also found there was a problem in getting large print books for people who have got issues with, you know, smaller print, and the audio files is not audio book is not something that they were comfortable with. They'd just rather have larger print. And just another sort of question with the delivery service, how do people select the books that they want? Do they get sent a list of what is available? Do they have things sort of chosen on their behalf? Just a sort of a question around that, really. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, I'll answer the last bit first, if you don't mind. So the one of the things that we found that customers really liked as part of the call and collect system was they could choose their own books, and some did, which is kind of the traditional request system. But very often they liked the fact that the library staff who know their customers well, because they're local and that's the type of service it is, were picking books on their behalf. They could see what they've read before, so that there was no duplication, etc. And they really liked that service. And it's interesting that we may see a change in behaviour in how people access services from here on in. We're not out of this pandemic yet, so it's too early to say, but we think that call and collect system and that kind of pre-selection of books for you will be something that will remain popular even through the recovery period and beyond that, as more people are accessing both retail and the leisure services through a different way. So yeah, that was really popular. I do take your point about the publicity of the service. We do have details on our website of the home delivery service, and I know that we also did a press release with the council, I think more than once during the pandemic as well, about what was available and the impact that the home delivery service was having on people, which was extremely positive. And I won't go into it now, but I'm happy to share some of the survey responses with the committee after the meeting and through you, Chair, and Andrew. But it's something we can certainly pick up and make sure that the community coordinators and social workers are also aware of the service, so that they can refer people. And if there was a more formal, joined up way of doing that, then I think that's the future, and that's where we need to be heading.
Thanks very much. Councillor Denisha Patel, do you want to respond as well?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I won't glow about the service area right now, but I did look through my emails because I know I've personally signed off a number of press releases. So in June 2020, there was a media release sent out by the local authority around the library services. In January 2021, there was another press release sent out by the local authority. And also in council in July, I made an announcement about the library services. So I'm not clear as to why members aren't aware. I take the point that the public comms is probably not as good, but I just wanted to make the point that I've personally announced these things 3 times. So yeah, that was it really.
Great, thanks very much for that. I think some of the issues are when there are press releases sent out, they get shared online, so they're digital. But again, a lot of the residents who are using this service are not on Facebook, they're not online, they're not able to see any of these, so they need the information out there a different way. And I think when we've got when we used to have the information in libraries, which is the very issue we're talking about, then they weren't going to get any information from there. With community centres closed, they weren't getting information from there. And I think it particularly for members going forward, I think it would be better if we'd be sent something that we could potentially ask to be put in the community councils notice boards, or also include in the community councils, because if somebody misses a meeting or an announcement or something, then that's not going to be passed on. And when you're talking about several hours of meetings, not always everything's picked up. Councillor Gebbie.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think it's, I agree with the comments. Actually, we need to get some communication out there in a different way. It's something that I've stated many, many times. However, all our press releases already go to all the community councils, so they already have that information. And, you know, I know that I'm chair of a community centre, I'm chair of trustees at a community centre, and I know that we have all that information. And we, during the pandemic, we've actually been available. So I think as members, if you've got any suggestions as to how we can share that information more readily to people who aren't able to access it, like you say, on social media or through the press, then please feel free, because we're all up for sharing those ideas, because the better our constituents know this information, the better outcomes they have. Thanks very much, Chair.
Thanks very much. Councillor Danisha Patel.
Yeah, I would just like to support what Councillor Jane Gebbie said. I sit on the community council as well, and we do get shared all of the media releases. And then obviously, as my job as a local member, I do go out and tell residents about different services that are available to them. And I think just another point, the media releases are drafted to be sent to the newspapers. So part of it isn't in our control. Like, we send them the media releases, and ultimately the editors choose what they want to put in their papers. So it's not really within our gift to say, this is really important information, you need to print it. They like, you know, the sensational stories.
Okay, great. Thanks very much. Has anyone got anything else on the library points in the report? No, the only other one we picked up in the pre-meeting was looking at the 4.15 was the increased demand in digital resources. So it says during 2020-2021, there were 89,413 digital items issued, and Arwen have been investing in increased digital resources. I just wanted, I mean, throughout the pandemic, I had digital books. That's something I choose to do. But again, looking at particularly the older generation, and like you say, the large print books, to make sure that we're not going to wholly move to digital, and we will retain paper books and large print books for those members of the community who require them.
Yes, absolutely. The largest section of what we've got will always be printed books. There's no moving away from the fact that people are accessing their resources in a different way, and that includes books. And we do think that trend will continue, but the more significant investment that we make will be in physical print, and that is still the most popular medium of borrowing at this time. Who knows where we'll be in 10 years' time? But yeah, certainly at the moment, there's no significant or material move away from physical print to digital. But we have seen a significant, obviously brought on by the pandemic, but we are expecting that to continue, even though it may well plateau as we go along. So and I think that's just been the general trend. If we look at things like Amazon, for example, where there was significant increases in people using ebooks through Amazon for many years, that's also plateaued. Now, that was pre-pandemic, so the popularity of Kindles and so forth has plateaued out.
Okay, great, thanks. Councillor Mike Clark.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everybody. Is it okay? You mentioned that was the last point. Am I okay to speak to point 8.1 and 8.2 now?
Yeah, that was the last ones on the library issue. Yeah, you can come in on those if you want, but I don't know if Councillor Hugh David wanted to come in on the library issue because he's raised his hand as well.
I'd like to come in on that point when you get to it.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, oh, thanks, Chair. It was just around that point on digital inclusion and the importance of that. And I think it's referred to in the report, but it has been a real area of success, is the work that we've done with carers, for example, in terms of making the digital devices available to carers so that they could access resources like libraries, and they were digitally included, whereas before the pandemic they often didn't have access to such facilities. And of course, we're all aware of the work that was undertaken through our schools to ensure that none of our children were digitally excluded. So there's been a number of different work streams to offer that option to people where that is an option they want, but as we've discussed, that isn't the option that everyone wants to take. There will always be that role for printed books, and we also, through the Books on Wheels service, will continue to support those individuals too. But I'm sure Richard or Andrew could come in and confirm that we will continue that work around reaching out to those digitally excluded people, because we also recognise that is a constant piece of work, because people, there are still lots of people who are digitally excluded, and people's circumstances change as well, and the digital platforms are also continuing to evolve quite rapidly. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks very much. Andrew, to respond?
Yeah, I was just going to introduce that in terms of commitment to libraries being a place-based opportunity for support, you know, the investment in recent years into library facilities and resources remains positive. I think during the pandemic, Porthcawl Library has received some upgrade work and investment. Pile has not been that long ago. You know, the Maesteg Town Hall physical library provision will be state of the art, and I think Owen also have plans to look at securing investment for Pencoed. I think being clear that the things that libraries do are broader than the digital and the books, in terms of the community groups and the young family support and homework clubs and coding, you know, developing libraries into quite vibrant, engaging spaces for the broader population. remains important. And I guess the final bit for me is Welsh Public Library standards tend to ensure that there's a focus on investing in book stock and making sure there's a balance between adults and children's and Welsh medium and those kinds of things. So hopefully that gives some reassurance. I'm talking or shooting from the hip here, but Richard Hughes, you may have some things to add.
No, you're absolutely right, Andrew. I think as well as the digitally excluded as well, I don't think we should also underplay the fact that certainly as people are getting older now, a lot of older people are digitally savvy, and they, as our age group moves through the generations as well, and might need support later in life, that the context changes to perhaps what we've always considered to be traditional care settings. We look at that even so far as the music and everything that we now play or encourage to be played in residential settings. Gone are the days of playing kind of keep the home fires burning. We're now into the 50s and 60s where people want to listen to rock and roll, and that's what takes them back from a reminiscence point of view. And I think that a similar vein for digital, that a lot of people are now accessing things through digital. So as well as making sure people aren't excluded, we also have to make the most of those new technologies and the platforms available to us. And I think the most recent project where we took virtual reality goggles into care homes as part of discovering memories and stuff worked exceptionally well, and the residents loved it. And that's a way we can use new technologies to support well-being, and the results of that were very impactful. So, but thanks, Andrew, for covering those points as well about the wider services being carried out in libraries that have been really missed by people through the pandemic. But as the report says, we were only shut for around 3 months in libraries, and they maintained a service all the way through, and I think that has been welcomed by many people. Thanks, Chair.
Great, thanks very much. Claire Marchant, did you want to add to this before I bring in Councillor Lewis?
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. And it's just to build very briefly on the points that Richard and Andrew have made. That people need people. I think that's the starting point, and digital is an enabler as much as anything else for connecting people. So we've talked about the council leader talked about the work through the South East Wales Carers Trust in terms of the grants there into carers who could have felt very isolated during the pandemic, to give them digital resource. Talked about the resources going to our children and young people. The libraries as community information hubs do so much more, as Andrew has said, than just provide books and reading resources for people. They are at the heart of community, and making them and the other community facilities vibrant places where people come together and have lots and lots of their needs met, not just the need for reading materials, I think is really important. But using digital as that enabler for people, as we've seen in that care home example, which is excellent, and not being scared of using digital resources with our older population as well as the younger population to enable them to connect to people and family members who may be living on the other side of the world, who they wouldn't have seen otherwise. So I think it's around an overall strategy and linking up with some of the work around local area coordinators, particularly to connect people to what works for them, and digital being part, but not the only part of that strategy.
Great, thanks very much. Councillor Janice Lewis.
Yes, Chair, it's sort of an omittance of me earlier on. Can I declare an interest in the fact that I am a member of St Bride's Community Council, and therefore we contribute to the wages of the librarian within the community centre? Sorry about that. It was just, I've got to ask a question then as to other libraries being mentioned, but not Sarn Library has been included in any future increases. Sorry, Chair, do apologise.
Okay, no problem. No problem. Does anyone want to come in and respond to that? Can you just repeat your question for them?
do apologise. I'm aware of the background noise. Sorry, I got somebody in the background there. You mentioned improvements in various libraries throughout BCPC, but I noticed Aberkenfig wasn't mentioned, and Sarn. Are they within the remit of any new increases in what you're going to do? Are they digitally wise, computer wise, things like that? Sorry, Chair.
No problem. Andrew, able to respond?
I think we would have an aspiration that all of our assets, whether they be leisure, cultural or community, are modernised and keep pace with the needs of people. I guess being able to do them all in one stream is a challenge. I think the investment that we are securing, we've probably done pretty well with out of the Welsh Government streams, but it's obviously one project at a time. Aberkenfig has certainly been in discussions based on its size and scale and potential to do other things. Mr. Hughes, I'm not sure if you want to come in. I'm not sure if there's been some changes in how the library service is funded at the Sarn site currently as well.
Yes, thanks, Councillor Lewis, for the question. All the library sites are always looked at so far as where investment is concerned. Sarn is actually in library terms in Bridgend probably one of the more recent ones to be redeveloped, because it was done as part of the community centre redevelopment, which you'd remember well towards I think it was about 2011-12 that was completed. And Sarn's actually got one of the most extensive IT resources that we have in certainly for a small library as well. But we do keep a lookout to see what we can do better or more of, and certainly to enhance spaces for children and young people as well, which I know is a priority for you as a council and for the surrounding area there in Sarn. So we'll also see how we can work with the other partners within that community centre as well. So that's the but certainly Sarn is always in our thought. All the libraries we look at on a continuous basis, so there's certainly kind of not a queuing system. We look at where the opportunities are, or year in, year out, and Sarn would very much be in our thoughts.
Great, thanks very much. Councillor Patel.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to declare an interest similar to Councillor Janice Lewis's. I'm a member of that community council, but I didn't know that this conversation was going to stray into Sarn specifically.
Okay, no problem. Thanks very much. Councillor Clark, you had a question on on one of the points in section 8. We've got some more on in the 4s at the moment. Are you content for us to continue through the 4s first?
Absolutely, yeah, no problem.
No problem, and I'll come to you when we get to that section. The next part of the report, please feel free, anyone in the pre-meeting or anyone and the other members, to jump in as well with this, was the looking at the Barvo and the work that you've done as well. Looking particularly 4.26, I thought it was a lovely idea myself about the pen pal scheme and the volunteers. I wondered, were all primary schools approached, or was it just a number of select primary schools for a pilot? Because I think it would be something that would be nice to roll out to all schools, because it not only does it help schools in writing, but it also then will help to write out to those people who may feel isolated.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. Yeah, it was only the one school that we actually engaged with, because there was a specific pot of money that we had to actually work over a period of time, which I think was about 3 to 4 months. So of course it was a pilot that we actually tried, and the stats and the information that you find is the outcomes of it, and it was a real good piece of work. I think it's the same with all that goes on within the sector. it's actually having the capacity to then maintain it. Because of course, when we're having to have pieces of work like that done, it's not just about having somebody connecting with the schools. There is also safeguarding issues that we have to manage. There are all these different things that have to take place. And of course, you have to then have the people in place to be able to manage them. But yes, it was an excellent piece of work. And I can see Andrew has his hand up, but it was actually Andrew who connected us in with it through the funds.
Okay, great. Do you want to come in then, Andrew?
Yeah, I think it's an example, Chair, of where, if we can call it technology from the past, still has quite a lot to offer the modern world. We've got quite a nice case study where one of the elderly ladies that was receiving the postcards or the communications actually said there are times when I'm just happy to read the 6 or 7 back to back, and I find that really helpful. And also,
sorry, can I just ask, Councillor Thomas, do you have to leave? Right. Oh, you're on mute, but I'm taking that you're telling us you have to leave.
That's it. Thank you very much.
No, no problem. Bye. Sorry about that, Andrew.
No,
continue.
It's fine. I was just saying that simple things can go a long way when we're talking of digital exclusion and trying to develop intergenerational work. You know, we will have an agenda of sort of becoming an age-friendly community and looking at how you bring different population groups together and add value. This is a great example. Probably doesn't need huge amounts of money in the future. We tried to get some loneliness and isolation investment, which we couldn't apply this year because Welsh Government wanted it to go out in smaller amounts to third sector groups. But in terms of expanding this kind of approach within a broader approach to befriending and support for loneliness, you know, the pilot that we run has really got something to offer.
Great, thanks very much. I did miss one point, going back in the report to 4.22, and the independent review of the programme has identified 5,194 people supported at October 2021, with 21 community opportunities developed and 527 people trained, in particular volunteers. Was this the work done through Barvo? Because I know that throughout the pandemic you were vital in providing volunteers and bringing in volunteers to assist with the numerous problems throughout the community.
Yeah, it's our partnership, really, Chair. I think the investment that we've managed to secure has supported the community navigators and the volunteer development roles within Barvo. There's been quite a strong platform at Bronze Command between BCBC and Barvo in terms of positioning who was best placed to respond. You know, volunteers, I think, have supported people, but in a sustainable way. So whether it was actually shopping or prescriptions or befriending or other types of need, wherever possible, that hasn't needed to be repeated in every instance. It was setting people able to manage their own approaches, but without doubt, Barvo have provided the leadership and the resource for what was intended originally to be a small programme with 300 beneficiaries, but it proved able to support high volumes based on community connections. And I think of those, I think it was 94%, Kay can correct me, that were able to be supported within communities at that period in time, and the majority preferred to be allowed to support their own independence rather than to receive any other form of provided support, should we say. But yeah, that's very much a credit to Barvo being raised here, and many thanks for the partnership working.
Yeah, I think before I bring Kay in, I think it's incredible, the figures. 5,194 people supported and having 527 people training to be volunteers in a time where there was so much uncertainty and you didn't really want to mix or anything. I think it's an incredible achievement. Did you want to come in, Kay?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I suppose it's just to build on what Andrew actually said here, and thank you for the recognition on the numbers that I've actually gone through. I think what happened within 2021 was something that nobody was really expecting, and I suppose what I would have to do is also give credit to our staff within our organisation, and indeed the commissioners, for allowing us to diversify our services, because that is exactly what we had to do. It wasn't just about the staff that were commissioned maybe to deliver volunteering, just doing volunteering or mental health. It was about them actually addressing the growing need at any one specific time. And as you can see, the volunteering with regards to the pharmacies, with regards to the shopping, really was extensive. I suppose what I would then just like to say is where we're at now is exactly as Andrew said. It's not about us actually continuing just to deliver what people believe they're requiring. So for instance, continuing shopping or prescriptions, it's about us trying to support and educate them in how they can then do it for themselves. So where we're at the moment is that our community navigators are not there to handhold people for long term, but what they do is maybe for 1 or 2 visits, they will actually handhold them to make sure the person now is comfortable in the aftermath of what COVID has actually brought, which are a lack in confidence, the loneliness and all the rest of it. So yeah, we're in a different place, and you know, anybody that wants to know anything about the actual work that individual roles are doing to connect into each other, I'm more than happy to go through that with them as well. Okay.
Great, thanks very much. Claire, did you want to come in?
Yeah, thank you very much. And just to echo all the acknowledgements about the response that there has been during the COVID pandemic, but also just to build upon what Kay was saying there about how we move forward together, because I think that diversion of the programme was recognised in the evaluations, the independent evaluations that have been undertaken. The initial ambition, resourceful, resilient communities, was very much about supporting communities and individuals to sustainably support their own well-being, and a real focus on connection into communities and community development, and developing approaches within the communities which are resilient and sustainable, but led by communities themselves. This diversion into response obviously distracted from those original intentions within the programme, and now we're using some of our social care recovery funding and trying to plan through the new regional integration funding going into next year for how we support communities and individuals to recover, to get back to where those original intentions of the programme were. But it's just to recognise that it was a major diversion, and we've now got to refocus in a sense of where we originally intended these programmes to develop.
Great, thanks very much. Don't think there's any more hands up on this this point. Moving on then, we had a discussion as well in our pre-meeting about community centres, and I think this comes under actually 4.30 specifically, working with committees and of community centres to develop safe operation and activities. We just were wondering if all of the community centres in the borough are now up and running and open for people to go, because obviously during the pandemic all of these would have been closed, and sometimes they're a vital place for people to go so they don't feel so isolated. So I don't know who can come in and answer that.
I will do my best, Chair. I think there's a mixed picture both now and also during the pandemic. I think there are centres, community centres during the pandemic that thrived and really supported the broad range of essential public services. I think Councillor Gebby is on the call and will have some personal experience, I think, from her own piece of the world, and there are others that have supported those kinds of work. I think other centres probably had different challenges. I'm aware of at least one that has struggled to reopen based on management committee and capability. Others, I think you'll find, are now permitted to open, and with far less restrictions, are gradually rebuilding from the base. some of our centres, particularly those that are working with and have continued to work with the more vulnerable or been providing sort of the food poverty support throughout, are in a far more advanced position. One of the things that we are looking at the moment is to progressively look at equipping community centres digitally to also connect with each other and build virtual village hall concepts, and also to support hybrid offers for those that can or can't always physically attend based on vulnerability. And I guess some of that may even connect in with the carbon neutral agenda in the future, where you may not always need to attend centralised locations, and your community centre may have more appeal and opportunity for you, but that isn't going to be a quick fix. But for all of these centres, volunteer run, costs such as energy increasing, some of the COVID safe environment challenges, it has not been easy for a number of the centres, but we have programmes operating within those. I think with Kay on the call, beyond those that are council centres, there may be some context, or even Councillor Gebby may have some knowledge on such things.
I see Councillor Gebby's put her hand up anyway, so I was going to call her in next.
Thank you, Chair. Let me put my hand down while I remember. Firstly, I suppose I was guest speaker last week at Bavo AGM, and they invited me to talk about my community centre. That's exactly what I did. I think I was very fortunate in so much as I have other external people that I'm able to call on for favours. And I do say favours. One was health and safety. He came in and put in a rapid risk assessment in process for us because we didn't want to close. We wanted to be able to maintain a provision for vulnerable constituents. I think what's really been difficult for us is finance. We are not earning anywhere near like we did pre-pandemic. We've been very fortunate that we've had a Bavo connector working out of our community centre. We were very fortunate that they gave us indications and help, support, guidance and advice, I want to say, in relation to any grant applications we were making. But one of the biggest things for us was the changes all the time. We didn't actually know what service provision we were going to be able to do because it kept changing. We actually opened up the centre for lunches again last summer, and then we had to close them again because we couldn't facilitate that safely. So I'm aware of other community centres that haven't reopened as yet. So I think that's really quite sad, because I think each community needs a community centre, a central hub. But I think it depends on who owns them, who's on the trustees, as an example, who's got those ins, and how much advice and guidance and support. BCBC, you know, I'm sitting here as a cabinet member, but actually BCBC and their management of grant funding through Bavo was brilliant, because without it, we wouldn't have been able to do it. And pre-pandemic, you know, I gave an example. Pre-pandemic, we were doing 35 meals in a luncheon service, and that was generally the more older population of the village, those that didn't get out so much, and it helped decrease their loneliness and isolation even prior to the pandemic. So we were keen for them to have some contact. At the height of the pandemic, we were doing in excess of 200 meals per day, and that was only for vulnerable people. Now, I'm fortunate. One of the things I could do was get my roll of knives out and get my chef whites on, because I'm qualified a long time ago, but I can still put myself in a commercial kitchen and cook, which we needed. But people haven't been that fortunate across the board. So I think it's something that each individual community centre needs to take up with themselves. And if there's any help, support or guidance that any of us can give them, and I say that about Bavo more than anybody else, because they've connected us and they've ensured that we've maintained our viability, I think is what I'd like to say. Thank you very much, Chair.
Great, thanks. Kay, do you want to come in then?
Thank you, Chair. Only briefly, just I suppose to to confirm what Councillor Gebby is saying, and Andrew, that does seem to be a pattern across the borough. I suppose with some centres, we are individually supporting them in different ways, and indeed growing what it is they're able to do. So in Caira, and in my stake, for instance, we're looking at repair cafes and looking at how the other areas then can actually learn from what it is they are doing. But again, these are different things the centres are actually picking up on, so it doesn't mean that the one type fits all. It's about how each individual centre is able to access what funding they're needing, I suppose, to take forward what it is they see as of value within their area of benefit. And again, you know, just to pick up on one of the things there, I suppose, is looking at the PAT testing for electrical items is an important one for one group to be able to do. And of course, these all sit in within different centres then within the borough. But yeah, just to reiterate that there is a problem and there is a need for the support going forward, but not, as I said, just a one fit all. It is about individuals having individual support to do what they feel is best for their area.
Great, thanks. I think the leader, Councillor Hugh David, wants to come in now.
Thanks, Chair. I should probably, as we're having a kind of in-depth discussion on community centres, declare wasn't expecting an in-depth discussion on community centres, but declare an interest as Chair of Kevin Cribble Community Association. I've been for over 15 years, and that manages the community centre in Kevin Cribble. But I'd echo the points that have been made. I think the experience is different across the county borough, but certainly in the community centres that I know about, some have experienced, as we have in Kevin Cribble, some increase in activity, because what we've seen is that people are really keen to get back to in-person, face-to-face contact, particularly after a period when it wasn't possible, and we continue to see new initiatives that can provide additional useful facilities. So I'm thinking about the community pantries that have been very successful across the borough, and I know it's certainly been very successful in Kevin Cribble. But I just wanted to add that I know that some, well, at least one community centre, I think it's Coity Higher Community Centre, is still not available as we'd want it to be, because of course it's been used as for several months now. It's been used as a very important testing centre for COVID. So we're still working through that in terms of all our facilities, and a lot of community centres that I know about, Talbot being a case in point, and other community centres are still rebuilding, because we've lost some groups that perhaps will never return, but we've also seen some new groups spring up, and new initiatives like the community pantries. But what I would do is urge those community centres that are struggling to get in touch with BARVO, get in touch with the local authority, because we do see and do recognise their importance and want to do all we can to try and support them, so that they can continue to provide that service in local communities. Thanks, Chair.
Great, thanks. Right, I think there's two more questions I've got written down from section 4 of this report, and then we can move on, because I appreciate we've been here a long time, and but it is a very important report we're looking at. 4.35 in regards to young carers, it was just simply, have we seen an increase in young carers since the pandemic? Don't know who wants to answer that. Claire.
Yeah, Chair, I think I'm going to struggle to give you an exact figure, which is why I was delaying putting my hand up. We know that we've been doing a lot of work, and one of the key challenges in appropriately addressing the needs of young carers is identification of young carers, and the work that we are doing through the Young Carers Card, and the work that we need to do going forward with schools is really fundamental in that, in terms of that early identification, so we can put the right care and support in place and services if necessary, and make sure that young carers are having all the appropriate support that they need. I will come back to you with the exact figure of young carers that we're identifying through MASH and IAA, because we've got a young carers assessment worker based there, and there'll be a small proportion of young carers who go on to have an assessment of their needs. More young carers will have their needs met through information, advice and assistance, and through that early intervention and prevention. But I'll come back to you with the exact figure if that's okay.
Great, yep, thanks. I know you put your hand up, Councillor Gebby, and you took it down. Did you want to come in?
Well, I was only going to reiterate some of what Claire's just said about the difficulty of identifying young carers. But in my previous, you know, with another hat on, I can actually tell you it's really, really difficult, because young people don't identify themselves as young carers. It doesn't matter what they do. It doesn't matter whether they've got a sibling that has additional needs. They would do it without thinking, because that's what they've grown up like. So I think it's really difficult. So anybody, so, you know, it's a call to members. If members can see that they have a young carer in their midst from wherever they've picked it up from, it's really useful for us to be able to identify and ensure that they've got the appropriate support. So I think that's just the comment I'd like to make. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thanks very much. Did you want to add to it, Andrew?
Yeah, I was just going to say that beyond the social work practice aspects, I have members of my prevention team that are trying to proactively engage, particularly with those young people who have caring responsibilities, but as Councillor Gebby identifies, don't recognise themselves as having that sort of identifiable role, but probably could benefit from some of the support that's available. So we've run 2 programmes during the year, one using the youth consultation group of people to look at what the young carers card that we used to have meant, which didn't come across where you'd like it to be, and then to introduce the new Welsh Government approach to young carers identification and what partners could look to unlock for them in terms of social opportunities or engagement in different things that are meaningful to them. And I think through our work with schools, we've got a number of network groups now. So we've got about 204 young carers that we've been engaging with to identify what a network would look like, how they would propose it would run, what it focuses on. And I guess beyond the young carers is the young adult carer dimension. And if nationally there's an identification that the number of carers has gone up significantly, as a reasonable assumption, the number of young carers has similarly in the round. But I think, as Claire says, we're probably in a better position to identify those with assessments and related support plans than all of those that are currently out there, but we are making ground on that.
Great, thanks very much. The final point I've picked up on number 4, on the tail end of number 4, is the sports and the physical activities, and it says for adolescents, and it was just to confirm the ages of adolescents, because the biggest concern I have myself as a parent and as a governor in a school is those younger children, particularly that, you know, they've missed primary age children have potentially missed 2 years of, for example, after school clubs. I know some schools have started bringing in after school sports, but sometimes, or well, a lot of the time, it's the only sport or the only physical activity that young children are getting. And I think we need to ensure that we're starting at an early age on the health and well-being of younger children before moving into adolescence, to make sure that we're nipping the problem in the bud now. I know as a mum, my daughter has put on weight because she hasn't been doing all these after school clubs she would have normally been doing in school and the extra physical activity. So it's just making sure we've got a plan there for the younger children, to make sure that we're also supporting them on what we're going to do to make them more fit and active, and to catch up with any potential sports that they've also missed. And I can see Councillor Patel has got her hand up to come in.
I'm sure Andrew can add more detail, but in January I did make the announcement about the Winter of Wellbeing, which is one of the programs that we've put in place to help with this. So not all schools would be able to offer every single night something, and so we are working with our partners that help deliver the Summer of Fun program, and that was something that we put in place over the summer to try and help motivate young people to get out and to be active and to reintegrate into society, and we're doing it again now with the Winter of Wellbeing. I don't know if Andrew wants to add more detail.
Yeah, I think in terms of Winter of Wellbeing, schools have also been given direct investments for Winter of Wellbeing, certainly across the county. It recognises really that young people universally have been challenged by the pandemic. Certain population groups of young people in particular have probably faced significant challenges, and there's opportunities for partners to actually deliver community engagement activities and programs. And I think with us, we're tending to work through partners. I think Arwen are involved, Halo are involved, the areas are involved. I think through our work with Pavo, community groups and Youth Matters Network have all benefited from investments. We can't invest that money into schools because schools have their own resources, but we do have our Sport Wales investments that we do annually use to invest into our schools, whether it's teaching staff receiving whole school training around physical activity and well-being, resources to help deliver programs. Without a doubt, over the last year, we've been making digital resources available to staff and teams to be able to run things, including remote support for people that have been at home. But going forward, I think most people are hoping for more face-to-face opportunities and to see these things continue to grow. Our investment from Sport Wales continues. Maybe, Chair, there's something we can share with you about what that might look like going forward for 22 onwards. You know, within the report, schools have been very positive around things like the school cycling, national standards program, getting active travel more promoted, more young people and families prepared to do that. So that's a good indication for us that it isn't a no for us, but I think schools have been more wary about other things coming on to site. But I think going forward, there is an appetite. We have partnership agreements with our primary schools. They've been given more flex in the last year because of the obvious. Going forward, schools will have resource to work together and to plan on how to get these things re-established.
Great, thank you very much. Has anyone got any more questions on the report before I bring in Councillor Clark? You had a question on section 8.
Thank you, Chair, and once again, good morning, everybody. My question around that is, a risk is identified in terms of, I guess, the sustainability of the various initiatives and schemes and deliveries that are coming forward. I'm conscious that it takes time to develop new initiatives, and there are a lot of exciting initiatives we've heard about today. But funders also have criteria which may not necessarily align with the initiatives that a particular business wants to push forward. So I wonder, first of all, what the challenge is to match the aspirations of Arwen and Halo in terms of developing delivery and funders, Big Lottery and Welsh Government. Linked to that, what I'm very conscious of as well is that in terms of developing a new initiative, there is a lead time in terms of developing an idea, identifying the need, and then developing an approach to be able to find the funding for it. And then the funders themselves have deadlines. So that, I guess, presents another challenge. Overarching those, I wonder how that dependence on grant funding, and it isn't just in this area, it's dependent, we hear it in social services and other areas. I wonder what the issues are around staff job security and in terms of developing long-term strategy. And I guess finally, I wonder how much what is the percentage, if you like, of the business turnover that is relatively short or medium term grant dependent? Thanks, Chair.
Thanks. Andrew, you're on screen.
Yeah,
Andrew smiling.
Can you pick one of those questions, please, Councillor Clark?
I did think that really, yes, I can, but I think what I'm saying is that that in terms of developing a new service, got to identify the service that's required, then the funder who might, the funding stream to support that. But it takes time. We've talked about the numbers involved in the various schemes. It takes time to be able to develop the scheme. Then in terms of the information that comes back from the coalface, the actual delivery, that more often than not will mean a scheme needs to change to address need. And then it seems to me that almost at the point that you get going and the numbers are going up and everything's getting exciting, you've then got to find a fresh pipeline of funding to be able to maintain its sustainability, if you like.
I think I'll make a start, but I think what I will then do is defer to two of our colleagues who come from a social enterprise background, which is really the underlying philosophy of some of these things, where you test ideas, innovate, scale up, and then look to embed things that work on a more, I won't call it commercial, but semi-commercial footing. I think for my own area of service and the partnership, we throw quite a lot of things at our partners on the call. Unfortunately, our partners are keen to actually work with us to test some of those things. It wasn't an accident that we were ready to support the pandemic, because the idea of working in this way and what resources we would need and what staff that had been put in place before COVID-19 had ever been mentioned. It's just that having a model of where you had complementary roles, where you pooled your resources and so on, that had been built into a way of working and a positioning of partners. Being honest, I think the risks that are being identified is core to how the third sector works in terms, and you will know this yourself, Councillor Clark, from your years of experience of having to find things, resource them, build them, and then hopefully get them to stand sustainably. So that issue is out there. I think the key that we have now is we're not starting from a new place. We've been, as Kay identifies, been building networks of people. We're looking to co-produce with the right population groups what it is that would really make a difference. And for a lot of the things, we're probably looking more at how we scale them up and mainstream some of these things as more important and more core business than others, and then looking at what kind of business model is the best way of making that work. Example I would give you of different mindsets and different thinking. Welsh Government makes funding available for the National Free Swimming Programme. If you so you can provide free access to under 16s or over 60s. Halo's response would be, if you signed up for Learn to Swim, which is an important period, we will give you free swimming anyway, because it's important and it makes business sense sustainably to do those things. So there's quite a lot about mindset to be worked through. I think for me, having longer term investment, we often have in the past gone for 1 year, small amounts that can mount up and take your energy and your time. So I suppose picking which are the most important items, looking at things that give you the right time and the resource to develop a bit more strength and a bit more intelligence about those programs is important. But I also think the way that Bridgend, not just within the third sector work, but where the anti-poverty investment, the way that is looking to be pooled across partners and programs, as opposed to it just being given out in smaller aspects, that I think is important. Do I think we'll always be chasing external funding? I think very much so for developing creative and innovation. In terms of scaling up, we should be looking at our core resources and where things make more sense than what we've always been doing that makes less sense. that's the biggest challenge overall, to stop doing something to do something new. And that's a big one for this whole prevention and well-being piece that we're presenting here. You know, it's that cultural shift of saying, by doing this, doing it cheaper, doing it well, maybe that gets better long-term outcomes for people. But I got a feeling we may have lost Scott Rolfe. I think Scott may have had to go at 11. I don't know if you're still on the call, Scott.
Yeah, hi Andrew. It is 11. I'm supposed to be someone else, but maybe I can cover a few points. I think harking back to some of the pressures that we face, so some of the questions from Councillor Clark, I think when we do a new initiative, we try to look at all the risks, and Andrew's point about long-term funding resonates. So if we do a pilot, I think we're not keen on getting into pilots where we think there isn't going to be any continuity. So we kind of try to assess all of those risks as much as we can. In terms of Halo as a social enterprise and what we're doing in managing the leisure portfolio, I think the business is slightly different, or the commercial aspects or the community aspects are slightly different, in that a large chunk of the revenue that's generated that gets reinvested is from the communities and the programs that we run. And we tend to grow those. So immediately the challenges that we face over the next 12 to 18 months is the recovery. So we've had fantastic support through lots of different statutory and non-statutory bodies, including government. But that will come to an end and it will tail off. Trying to predict the response from communities as we come through this is going to be a challenge. Although one of the opportunities that does stand out is those particular communities that are most in need and may well resonate across kind of all the funding landscapes to attract additional funding. And we've seen some great examples over the last 18 months. I'm not sure whether that answers the question spot on, but it gives you a flavour maybe from our perspective, and maybe some of my colleagues will have a different view.
Yes, I think so. It's building an answer, if you like.
Sorry, I kept myself on mute then. I can see Simon's got his hand up as well. You want to come in?
I had to put myself off mute as well. I did the same thing. Just to follow on from Scott, really, I think Scott's obviously covered the kind of the strategic kind of overview of how we work. I think the other element is just to recognise, really, Councillor Clark, is that we have a 5-year partnership plan that we work towards, which is made up of all the key documentation that is both from Welsh Government, also from BCBC, linking to the key objectives of BCBC, but linked obviously into the sustainability of the facilities, and we work on those in terms of how we develop our plans and our programmes. We're very lucky to have a very strong advisory board, so we created an advisory board at the creation of the contract, which sits actually a number of the members that are on this today sits on that advisory board, leader of the council and obviously the councillor for wellbeing. So that's kind of massively important to us. But we also have public health that sits on that, Sport Wales sits on it, our partner GLL sits on it. We have a number of the team from Halo that sit on that as well as a trustee from Halo, and that provides us with long-term strategic thinking. So the challenges that you mentioned, you know, we're aligned both with BCBC, with Welsh Government, public health, and also obviously for the local community, we're aligned to those. And if I was going to use one example of where our partnership work with BCBC, Arwin, Barvo, and obviously the cooperative, Welsh cooperative, has been successful. I would use the Feel Good for Life. It's been a very successful programme, but we originally started it, Scott mentioned about a pilot, we started it with £3,000, and I told you today that we're applying for 350,000 from the National Lottery, which shows the investment was initially from BCBC and where that programme goes. So we look at opportunities, we work in partnership, and ultimately, you know, we're doing it to try and have the best benefit in the community that we can. And I think if I was given a concept, that's kind of the one that I would use across the piece of all of those components working together to combat the challenges that we all face financially.
Great,
thanks very much for that, Chair. That's answered the question in terms of how it's addressed and around a lot of the issues. But in terms of it being a risk, you know, what level of risk are we talking about? It seems from the comments that are made that the risk is well managed, but I'd like to understand what level of risk there is. How serious is the risk? Is it just a risk and you're managing it well, or is it something that really your advisory board, if you like, are pretty concerned about?
I think Richard's got his hand up. I don't know if he can answer that part or whether it's to answer your previous question.
A little bit of both, I hope, Chair. From our perspective, and good morning, Councillor Clark, we take a deliberate kind of strategy when it comes to financial planning to try not to rely on grant income, certainly to sustain our core services. So so far as that being a risk for us, it's relatively low. So it's something that we've always set out not to have multiple posts dependent on grant year on year. So that's a lower risk for us. The longer term risk is always if central government funds dry up for capital schemes, for example, to keep maintaining venues. But at the moment, after the decade of austerity, things are looking bright to that effect anyway. Just a few wider points, and picking up on something Andrew said, what we do have to think of, I think, as a set of partners is how we embed these new things that we're all seeing as priorities. And the whole report is around the contribution of what we do to health and well-being. And the brave decision is always, as Andrew described, to stop doing some of the traditional stuff, or to stop having the traditional hours of opening and shifting what we do to other things. But also that shift in funding as well from health and social care to move it upstream into the community, so that we're preventing people going into those formal services, which are more expensive than what we do. And when I say we, I include everybody from the third sector, voluntary sector, be that community centres, through to leisure colleagues as well. I think that's the brave decision that we need to look at as partners. And also the fact that maybe not everything is always free to access. So we were talking earlier about the home delivery service. Well, some people might be able to in future to afford to pay for that. And you wonder whether those types of things should be what people are encouraged to pay for example, through direct payments, rather than the traditional focus of those services, which has been around traditional care needs. So I think there's a wider conversation. I'm pleased to say we are having it all the time with Andrew, with Claire and colleagues at the council. So I think it's a much broader conversation than each organisation. But going back to that answer, I think it's always maintaining an eye on the risk, and there are some things we do take a risk on, but try very hard not to become dependent on year grants.
Thanks, Chair. That's fine. I feel very comfortable with that. Thank you, Richard.
Great. Has anyone else got any questions on agenda item number 3? I can't see anyone, so can I thank everyone who's attended, all the invitees, and provided us with some thorough responses on this. I don't know, Andrew, did you want to come in? You're appearing on my screen.
I will disappear from your screen, Chair.
Thanks. Councillor Patel.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to thank, what's going on with my camera? I just wanted to thank all the invitees and Andrew for the report, because it was a very thorough report, and I think it's led to a really interesting discussion this morning. And so I just wanted to personally thank all of the invitees for coming and being so open and honest with us as elected members. It has been really useful.
Great, thanks. Yep, I totally agree. It's nice to have so many invitees and so many people in attendance who are able to answer our questions in full and giving us as much detail as possible. Thank you very much. All those who are able to leave now, please leave. That's not the members of the committee, though. You're welcome to leave.
Thank you.
Yep,
Bye-bye.
thanks. Right, we've got agenda item number 4 now. I'm conscious that some people want to leave, need to leave at 11:30. Are you happy for us to move straight into this, or did anyone want a quick break? There's nobody shouting up to have a break, so if you're happy, we'll move straight into this this report then. So it's agenda item number 4, which is the strategic developments to adult mental health services. So who's presenting this report? Is it?
I will be.
Right, great, thanks.
Councillor Williams. Okay, thank you. Just to reiterate the director's apologies, she's had to go to another meeting. And I'd like to welcome Robert Goodwin, who is the service group manager from Cumtaff Morgannwg Health Board, who manages mental health services here in Bridgend. And I think it would be appropriate to start by saying how important the partnership is in the delivery of mental health services. We absolutely do it together. We have a very helpful and productive relationship between us, and we couldn't deliver mental health services if we didn't have a strong partnership. So thank you, Robert, for agreeing to come today. And I'll just give a brief overview of the report, and then maybe we can go to the questions. I'm conscious that time may be short. So
great, thanks very much.
Is that okay? Okay, yeah. Thank you. Thanks. So the report starts by referring to the strategic document that we use as our point of reference, which is the Together for Mental Health delivery plan, which was reviewed in 2019 because of the pandemic. What that report contains is a number of overarching themes and then a number of priorities which apply to both adults and children's mental health services, but we're only here today to talk about adult mental health services. And those priorities guide us in how we deliver and develop mental health services here in Bridgend. So what the report then moves on to do is to give you an overview of the community mental health services in Bridgend. So there's a brief description of who they are and what they do. And then we tried to explain how those services were affected by the pandemic and continue to be affected by the pandemic, what effect the pandemic has had on demand for those services, how those services have altered their operating model in response to the pandemic. And I think I can say with some confidence that all of our services continued to operate through the pandemic. Nothing was stopped. We adapted and delivered services in a different way. And we're now in the process slowly of hopefully returning to what will be a new delivery model, which will become a blended model of what we learned through the pandemic and what our standard operating model has been in the past. So there's an overview of those community services, and then the report refers to the operating group, which is chaired by Rob and vice chaired by myself. The operating group is a group of senior managers from the council and from the Cumtaff delivery unit, which meets every month. We review the operating model of elements of the service, and we also talk about developments in services and planning for future developments. And there's a list in the report of some of the key projects that we're currently involved in. And I would draw committee's attention particularly to the first bullet point under section 4.6, which talks about a review of operational policies and service pathways in community mental health services. And we have we are in the process of having an independent review of our service delivery, which has involved a review of operational policies and pathways between different parts of the service, and also interviews with 40 people who either work in or use or are carers of people who use our services, and those 40 interviews are close to being completed, and so we're anticipating a report in a few weeks, which will be extremely helpful in helping us to work out what we need to do to improve our service delivery and plan for a way forward. And then the report then talks about some of the work we've been doing with the voluntary sector, and in particular draws attention to the wellbeing retreat, which we developed in 2020 with colleagues in the voluntary sector, particularly from Mental Health Matters. And this service has been in place now for just over a year. It's a crisis response service, which is a direct imperative on us to deliver from the delivery plan, which I referred to earlier. And that service has been up and running very successfully now for a year and has provided a crisis service to over 700 people in a year. So that's been a great success and a good example of joint working between ourselves and the voluntary sector. So I think that's probably all I would say on the report for now, Councillor Williams, and unless Rob wants to add anything, maybe we could go to questions.
Just to say, absolutely agree with you about the quality of our relationship, Mark. I mean, I think it goes back a long way, the relationships between BCBC and the Health Board, and we've got fantastic friendships between ourselves and the local authority staff, and you know, we couldn't do it without you, and it's just been really good.
Thank you.
Great, thanks. We did have some discussion in our pre-meeting. I'm conscious you've all virtually just had 2 hours of me talking non-stop, so I'm hoping I'll move it out before I bring in what we discussed in the pre-meet to see if any other members have any questions first, so that you get a change of voice and hopefully some more questions as well. So has any of the members got any questions on this report? Because again, likewise, I think similar to the last report, it's a very important report because with what we've been through the last couple of years, mental health is a key subject that we should all be taking an interest in. I'm waiting for the hands to go up. I can't see any hands going up at the moment, so hopefully people will join in as I start then. If you don't mind if I bring some questions in that we had in our pre-meeting, there were a few of us members in that. Looking at 3.5 of the report and then 4.2, because you touch on it in 4.2, you say the impact on mental health as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic has been evident during 2021, affecting the number and type of referrals to services. So you go on then in 4.2 to say referral rates have almost doubled in 2021 from the level in 2020. Do you have an example of what the actual figures are, how many referrals you're looking at? Because obviously if you start with 100
yes,
and it doubles to 200, but then if you have...
I'd have to refer to the team report, which I can either provide those figures for you after the meeting, or if you can just give me a second.
No problem. It's just to ascertain how many, because like I said, if you had 100 referrals before and then it's 200, yeah, and then you've got 5,000 before and 10,000, that's significantly more referrals.
It's for it's doubled from about 100 referrals that we think are a result of the pandemic to 200 referrals, which we think. Right. I mean, I can give you accurate figures, but I'm just looking at the overview report from the service, and so we're looking at that. That's the kind of scale.
Great. Okay. We touched on in the previous report about digitally excluded. Do you want to come in first, Councillor Watts, if you had a question on that?
Yes, just on the referrals, I note from 4.2 that it says there the vast majority of the referrals come from the police, and obviously the remainder from other agencies. I just wondered what number of referrals you might receive from, say, concerned neighbours, where they're aware that someone maybe is on their own, or they're concerned for them generally. Do you get many referrals, shall we say, just from the general public and neighbours, goodwill neighbours?
Thanks for the question, Councillor Watts. I'm just referring to the report. We don't, that isn't a category. We have family members who make referrals, a small number. Most of the other referrals come from agencies in the voluntary sector or other mental health services. We've got another category which is called other, but that's a very small number. So we don't actually have a category for concerned neighbours, but the police referrals come mostly from the police being called out to incidents in the community, which may well have been reported by neighbours. And when the police have dealt with the situation, they will complete a referral form to us. They wouldn't identify the neighbour who'd contacted the police, but I suspect that many of the police referrals are a result of neighbours being concerned about what's happening in their street or to one of their neighbours.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Robert, did you want to come in?
Or just an observation around the pattern of referrals that we see within mental health. And what we've seen is a growth in referrals in tier 0 and primary care, but the number of people with serious mental health concerns has remained quite flat in terms of the numbers. That's evidenced by the number of people who are being detained under the Mental Health Act, which is not significantly different to where it was prior to the pandemic. So the picture that we see emerging is people with health and well-being concerns within our local communities, but the rising, but not specifically the number with a serious mental illness. There are some exceptions, and one of those, it relates to people with eating disorders. I mean, this I think councillors will have heard on the news, the UK and Welsh news, that eating disorders has become a bigger problem across the country, and we're seeing that as well. Just thought that might be helpful.
Great, thanks. Okay, I think Councillor Watts is happy with that.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah.
Great. Going on to the next part of 4.2, and I mentioned in the previous report about digitally excluded, and you said that because obviously with the pandemic you had to alter your operating model to change methods of contact from face-to-face to phone and online contact. I just wondered, obviously you've got the phone contact, but sometimes it's very difficult if you're not seeing somebody face-to-face to ascertain exactly how they are feeling, because quite often you can see it in somebody's facial expression as well, not just in their tone by the telephone. So how did you deal with the digitally excluded, but also about the mental health issues relating to anyone who's made homeless, so doesn't have access then to any telephone or digital
Yeah, that's a good question, thank you. What the report doesn't say, and probably is an omission in terms of how the operating model worked, was that we did continue throughout the pandemic, although right at the very beginning it took a few weeks for us to pick this up. We did continue to go and see people, but that involved meeting them outside or in their gardens or through the front door. So if we felt that if a member of staff felt that they weren't satisfied with a phone conversation or a digital conversation and felt they needed more information, we were able, following a process of risk assessing every visit that we did, using PPE, using social distancing. We were able to, if we felt that a member of staff felt it necessary, we were able to go and speak to people directly, and as you say, be able to look at them and see what their presentation was like. So that didn't stop, but the bulk of review, regular contact with people who are known to the service would have been done by phone, or if they had access to a tablet or a laptop, we'd have done it digitally.
Okay, great. But how would you would they deal with anyone who has then appeared homeless? How would you deal with mental health issues relating to those people? Because by virtue of being homeless, and I think it increased during the pandemic, you're going to have some mental health issues. How do you manage to deal with those individuals?
So we work quite closely with the Woolwich, a voluntary sector group in Bridgend who deal with homeless people. They would make referrals into mental health services if they thought that was appropriate, and we would go to wherever that homeless person was to have a discussion with them, to meet with them again, as I said previously, following a risk assessment process, and using PPE and social distancing. There's Rob can probably say a bit more about this, but in Princess of Wales, there's a single point of access which provides an emergency response to people wherever they might be in the community, and they can either present at Princess of Wales, they may be brought there by the police if they were on the street and in distress. So there are different ways in which we would through our network of contacts in the voluntary sector and between ourselves, people would be referred to the right place. I don't know if Rob could maybe say a bit more about the single point of access, how that works.
Yes, we've kept that part of our service open, and it's a good service. It's one that's unique to Bridgend in our region. It does give people focused access to mental health services. They don't have to go through the GP or to accident and emergency. They can just pick the telephone up and call that number. For people who are homeless, obviously it's more difficult, but where they are supported by social care colleagues or people in the community, they can be referred with help. And as Mark has said, the police are always there to provide help for those in greatest need through the Mental Health Act, using their Section 136 powers. There are some additional resources. We've been working with the Area Planning Board to provide some homelessness support for people with substance misuse problems, and that's proving quite effective, and Mark and the team are connected into that service as well.
Great, thanks very much. I'll keep going through this until I hopefully see some hands up with some other questions as we go through the report. Looking at 4.3, the approved mental health professional hub, it says in this paragraph that there was a sharp increase in 2021, 117% from 18 to 39 people detained. So, and there's been an increase in the number of new people known to mental health services. Has this in any way led to a lack of beds, or has COVID impacted on capacity in hospitals if they're being detained?
We've kept our inpatient services open throughout the pandemic, and we've been able to admit all patients who need to be admitted. So I think clinical colleagues have made decisions around planned discharge for people who they can discharge in a safe way with support at home. But we've been okay in terms of capacity for our inpatient units throughout the pandemic. It's worked well for us. We haven't had the pressures that the general hospitals have had and there have been some issues around discharging people in our older people's services, but even there we have some spare capacity and we haven't been overwhelmed in the same way that some other services have.
Great, thanks very much. Going on to 4.4, the community mental health teams. There's no significant change in referral numbers, but there has been a notable increase in the number of young people on the autistic spectrum being referred. How are referrals made to the community mental health teams? It says in the assisted recovery and the community service in the next paragraph how referrals are made through there, but how are they made through this service, through these teams? And I'll leave it there and I'll go to the next bits next because it's a slightly different question.
Okay, I'll start and then maybe Rob can come in. The bulk of referrals to the community mental health teams are made through the GP. So people will go to their GP, the GP will make a call on whether they refer on to a community mental health team or maybe into one of the prevention and wellbeing services, or maybe social prescribing into some of the services that you were hearing about from Andrew in the last discussion. I think that the other bit I wanted to add there was that child and adolescent mental health services will refer young people into adult community mental health services, and that is where a lot of these young people, the route into services for a lot of these young people is from child and adolescent mental health services into adult mental health services, as their ASD becomes more apparent as they become teenagers and then young adults. I don't know if Rob wants to add to that.
Yes, just to councillors will be aware that the community mental health teams are in our secondary care service. They're hospital wards in the community. Effectively, they provide care for people with complex needs, and people who are in the community mental health teams are all care coordinated. So they have an identified nurse or social worker who's required to provide a care and treatment plan for them and update that with them. So these are amongst our most complex patients, but we have been able to allocate care coordinators to all of our patients who've been referred in. Mark mentioned the risk assessment process for contacts. We've maintained contacts with them face to face. So again, that part of our service has been maintained and held up very well, I think, in the pandemic.
Great, thanks. You answered one of my questions I was going to ask when I paused. And so just two more questions I've pulled out from this report when we had our pre-meeting was, have you seen any delays in referrals because of the potential problem with getting GP appointments for individuals to be seen physically by their GPs when they were having to do online referrals, and so there might have been delays? Have you seen any delays in referrals?
I think it was inevitable that with the way in which the pandemic affected general practice, that would impact on the number of referrals coming through the system. What we're seeing, though, is that they're rising quite quickly now as general practice goes back to more of a normal way of working. So I think the short answer is particularly our Part 1, our primary care mental health support services, did see a reduction in the number of referrals from primary care. But that's increasing rapidly now to where it was pre-pandemic. Okay. And as I've said earlier, our communities in Bridgend have direct access to mental health services through our single point of access. So if they need support and they feel they're in crisis, they don't need to go to a GP as they would have to do in a lot of other areas. They can just pick up the phone and get direct access to us.
Great, thanks. Well, that leads me into my final question from this report then, is to accessing these groups. And you've got a list of different groups as well who also provide support. How does an individual find out about those? Where are they posted if somebody's in crisis or somebody needs support, other than obviously consulting their GP or looking online or something? Do you have posters up? Do you have things in, for example, public toilets? Do you have something anywhere where people might go, particularly when there's been a struggle sometimes where some libraries have been closed or had limited access, or community centres haven't been there? Where do you display all this literature so that somebody can say, I need help, this is where I can go? Or like we discussed earlier, a neighbour or someone thinks, that's my neighbour, where do I go apart from just phoning the police?
I think that it's a similar answer to the discussion we had earlier on, that each of these groups will advertise in their own specific way and will have posters and leaflets available in the area in which they operate, or in the community centre in which they are local to. But as well as that, we, in terms of our information, advice and support function, the social workers in the SCART team, the workers in the assisted recovery in the community team, the workers in the wellbeing retreat would all have a function in signposting people to these services, and would have information about how to access these services in the community. So there'd be a number of different routes, and the single point of access, which Rob's talked about, would also have information about these services and would be able to signpost. So I think it's probably more about signposting and providing information. There is some use of posters and leaflets, but I suspect that's been difficult to do during the pandemic, with getting them produced and finding places open where you can put them up and places where people will see them.
Yeah, it's just that for people who are new to the service, who've not, don't know where to look, and who may not even realise they have a problem that they need support with. I don't know if you wanted to come in, Robert, before I ask Councillor Gebbie.
I agree with you, Amanda. We can always do more here. The publicising our services and how to get into them it is a challenge, and I love posters, I do, and it's nice to hear you sound like you like them as well. But I just think if they're really nicely designed, I think we should make more use of them. And clearly we've got buildings and places where they can well targeted posters can be really helpful. I mean, another area is in terms of suicide and self-harm reduction, where publicising where people can get support is so important. And you do see posters and publications around, diverting people to Samaritans and other people and other support. But I think we can do more there as well. I do think that Bridgend has done a huge amount around suicide reduction and self-harm reduction, and has been in the forefront really in terms of the way in which it's responded in a partnership way to these sorts of issues in the community by developing strategies and the like. And I know the former leader of the council and the chief executive were really quite prominent in that area. But that continues, doesn't it, Mark, in terms of the groups that have been established? So absolutely, there's always more for us to do around publicising our services for people in need.
There are a number of online routes as well. There's the council's website, there's Dowis, there's Info Engine, and the local community coordinators have a website so people who have digital access, it's probably easier in a sense, because the information will be very available online. But I think, as Rob is saying, the challenge for us is to get to people who don't have digital access and get leaflets and posters and information in a place where they're likely to find them and see them. So our appeal to these groups that are listed in the report would be that, you know, how can we help you to do that?
Yeah, because I think some people might not go looking digitally either if they don't know they have a problem and don't realise, because they might not be suicidal, but they might still have a problem and they don't know that until they've got something that they see and think, oh, actually, that could be me.
I think that's a really good point, actually, that people may not realise that they have maybe developing a mental health difficulty. They may have a substance misuse problem. They may not recognise it. They may not want to recognise it. And you know, quite often the success of service interventions, particularly in substance misuse services, is dependent on the individual having the willingness to want to engage and to take the help and support. So it becomes quite a complex process in engaging with people, and you know, we don't always get it right, as Rob said, and I think it's something we could, as we come out of the pandemic, it's something we need to think about how we can widen our range of providing information and advice.
Great, thanks. I can see Councillor Gebby's had her hand up for a while, so I'll bring her in now.
That's all right. I don't mind waiting. Thank you very much, Mark, for the report. It's very helpful to have it laid out so well in black and white. And thank all our mental health practitioners, I suppose, across the county borough. It hasn't been easy. There is always demand on the service. And I think potentially that demand is going to increase as we come out of the other end of the pandemic. I don't think that's anybody would dispute that. I think what would be interesting for members to note is that Councillor Patel and I met with a SPAD this week, so a special advisor from Welsh Government, and part of that was about distribution of mental health provision and how are we going to make it more public. So that was a conversation that we were having on Monday, and that was our first conversation, I hasten to add. So there is some planning work going on around that. So it might be something that Rob and Mark would both like to be involved with me. So I will make that opportunity available to you. And I think politically, I can say this. I think over the years, we have done ourselves a disservice with the amount we have taken out of our mental health provision. And also, we haven't got enough practitioners. It doesn't matter where you work, whether it's in health, local government or third sector, we cannot appoint to a lot of positions because we haven't got people taking those options through university. So, you know, I've already made a plea to all members about social care provision, but actually there's a plea if people are doing it, you know, we need to get people into university and taking up these qualifications to be lead practitioners in this area. It's something that's really important. And for members also to note, we actually have a good counselling provision in our schools as well. So young people are further advised in our education provision. Thank you very much, Chair.
Great, thanks very much. I don't know if any other members have got any questions on this report. Wait to see if any hands come up. I can't see any. I don't know if you've got anything else you want to add. Otherwise, it's a thank you very much for the report and for coming and answering our questions today.
Well, thank you very much for listening to us and reading the report, and thank you, Councillor Gebby, for the invitation. I'm sure we'll be very pleased to take that up, I don't think there's anything more for me to add unless Rob wants.
No, thank you for the invitation. It's absolutely lovely to meet you all.
Great, thanks very much. You're all welcome to leave now, apart from obviously the members of the committee who will move on to the next agenda item.
Thank you very much, Chair. Bye-bye.
Thanks, bye.
Thank you.
Right, okay, we're on to agenda item number 5, which is the nomination to the Public Service Board Scrutiny Panel. Meryl, do you want to take this forward?
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to request the committee to nominate one member to sit on the Public Services Board Scrutiny Panel. The panel holds up to 2 meetings a year and makes recommendations to Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Committee for approval before reporting back to the Public Services Board. To avoid duplication, of members nominated from other scrutiny committees, I can advise that Councillor Sorrel Dendy has already been nominated to the panel by SOC1. So I'll hand back to you, Chair, for the committee's nomination.
Right, okay. Does anyone have a nomination for this position, or does anyone want to do it? If you put your hand up. Don't all rush at me at once. Is there anyone who wants to do it? I don't know if there is a meeting, Meryl, before the
Meeting
the
before the
elections.
end.
There's one meeting now.
There may be
to the end
one
of the
before
year.
the end of this term, yes.
Right, okay. Is there nobody interested? Obviously, Councillor Sorrel Dendy can't do it. Is there nobody interested in it? No? Okay, Meryl. Well, if nobody else is interested in it, if there's nobody who wants to do it, then as chair, I'm more than willing to put my name forward. But that's as a last option.
So could we have a seconder, please?
I'll second that, Chair.
Right. Okay, so that's agenda item number 5. So we're on to agenda item number 6, which is urgent items, and there are no urgent items. So thanks very much for your attendance, everyone. I know it's been a long meeting this morning, but we have covered some very important subjects. So thanks very much, and see you all soon.
Thank you, Chair.